One,
Once
two,
more.
three, four, five, five, four, three, two, one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right. Everything, everything sounds good, Whit.
All right.
It's on you.
Alrighty. So, sir, can you start by telling me your first name, last name, and a correct spelling?
Sure. Gerald Wilson, Gerald Wilson.
And can you share with us your role in the Lancaster community?
I lived my whole life in Lancaster. I was born and raised here. My parents are from here in Lancaster. I graduated from McCaskey High School in 1971 and then went to work as a cadet with the Lancaster Police Department. I spent 26 years with the Lancaster Police Department, ending up as a shift commander with a rank of lieutenant. I left the police department in 1997 after 26 years and taught high school at McCaskey for 14 years.
Right. Awesome. Awesome. So, can you just share with us one of your favorite memories of the Conestoga River?
Well, I grew up in the 500 block of Woodward Street, which is about 4 blocks from the Conestoga River, down the Strawberry Street Hill. And I'd have to say, on any clear day, I was down at what we were called the creek. The Conestoga River was our playground. This is before the Lancaster County Pool was built, and our parents are responsible for complaining that us kids didn't have a place to swim, and they're responsible for the county building the county swimming pool. As a matter of fact, when they built the bridge to the county swimming pool on Strawberry Street, myself and my neighbor next door, neighbor Norbert Plaza, were the first kids to walk across the bridge, and the Lancaster newspaper took a picture of us crossing the bridge. And the bridge was not ready for crossing yet. It didn't have the guardrails or anything up, but that's certainly memorable. But I spent every day at the creek exploring, catching fish, just walking across the creek because we could do it.
Now, I have a question. When you swam in the creek, did you swim with shoes on?
A lot of times we did because there is a outgrowth of a foreign moss that's on the creek, at the bottom of the creek, and it's really a slimy moss, and it wasn't really desirable to be walking on that moss. So a lot of times we had our sneakers on. Now that's a good question because I had to hide my sneakers when I got home until they dried because my mom would ask me, Jerry, were you down at that creek again today? And of course I would lie and say no. But yeah, I was always down there at the Conestoga. On every clear day we were there. That was our exploration. And the big thing about it was the bigger kids in the neighborhood went down there, and other kids would ask us, we would get bamboo. We would have bamboo spears. And where the county pool is now, there was a big grove of bamboo. So when we got back to the neighborhood, we'd be showing off this bamboo, but we wouldn't tell anybody where we got it. And we would tell them if you didn't hang out with us, you couldn't get any bamboo. So that was a big thing.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. So, can you tell us about any community building activities that took place down by the river?
Well, at one time, the Riverside Club, which is now on the other side of the street on Chesapeake Street, that was on the other bank. So I kind of know the history of that. That area of the creek where we swam and did all kinds of exploring was called Reigert's Landing. Adam Reigert, one of the settlers in Lancaster from the 1700s, had a business there, and they transported goods up and down the Conestoga the whole way to England. Yes, they would take barges, flat barges, down the Conestoga with mules on the side of the creek, pulling these barges and those barges would go down, and the Conestoga empties into the Susquehanna, and the Susquehanna empties into the Chesapeake Bay, and the Chesapeake Bay goes into the Atlantic Ocean. So they would take goods the whole way up and down the Conestoga River long before my time, but I always knew about that. Why is this called Reigert's Landing? Well, it's called Reigert's Landing because of the business, Adam Reigert's business there. And his mansion was there at the base of Strawberry and Chesapeake Street. I know where his house was. I know where he's buried. He's buried right across the street in Woodward Hill Cemetery.
Is that the one at the end of Duke Street there?
Now at the end of where James Buchanan's buried. It has an entrance on Queen, and it also has an entrance on Strawberry Street. So it comes right down there to the creek. So right across the street from his home is where he's buried. So I knew the history of the barges. It intrigued me because I know that, of course, Ben Weber will tell you more about slack water and the canals, because you could easily go down creek, but how did you go up creek with no power? This is before there are motorboats or anything like that. So they would have these mules with ropes and pull these flat bottom boats back up, but they would have to use the canals that they flooded with water from the creek to bring, so that you weren't going against the current. But I always thought that was fascinating. There's no power. And of course, I also know the history of Robert Fulton, and he did his first experiments with the first steamboats, the first paddle boats there on the Conestoga. So there's a lot of history with our Conestoga River.
Yes. So now I'm curious to know, did white people and black people swim in the Conestoga River together?
I don't know that. Now
or at least during your time with your friends, did you make friends in the community that might have been different than yourself, and you
sure.
guys all?
That neighborhood at that time was very mixed. The southeast area, the 7th Ward, was really a black, white, a lot of Jewish. The Orthodox synagogue, Temple Degel Israel, was there on Chester Street, and all of the little grocery stores and everything. It was a self-contained Jewish community at that time because they had a haberdashery there, they had a meat market, they had Romanoff's Bakery, they had a Jewish school. So the neighborhood was very mixed. There was an Italian neighborhood. A lot of those were attached to Milton Hershey's caramel factory. A lot of Italians worked at his caramel factory. The two largest breweries in America were also there in Southeast Lancaster. So it was a very mixed and kind of a little more industrialized than it is now, with factories making umbrellas and making chocolate and caramel. And again, everything self-contained in that neighborhood. A Jewish grocery store was directly across the street from my house. So a lot of white kids and black kids, and later on Hispanic kids, played together. My next door neighbors were Hispanic, the Plaza family, and we hung out. They were part of our group going down to spearfish in the Conestoga, and just to spend time down there. We get away from your parents. Again, when I started, there was no Lancaster County swimming pool. And if you don't know, all of the swimming pools in the Lancaster area were segregated. No blacks allowed. Brookside, Maple Grove, Rocky Spring, all of those pools were segregated, so there were no places for black kids to swim. Thank goodness for the Lancaster Boys Club, because the Lancaster Boys Club and the Jewish Community Center together put together a program where they would take us by bus down around Peckway to the Jewish Community Center and let black kids have an opportunity to swim at their swimming pool.
How long was that ride?
To Peckway, I don't know, 20 minutes.
Okay.
30 minutes, yeah.
So the community had to take it upon themselves, and they made sure that the kids had the ability to swim in the swimming pool.
In a swimming pool, yeah. That was the Boys Club of Lancaster. They were responsible for that, knowing that we didn't have the other pools to swim in, and that went on to the late 1960s. I think the county pool was built in '67, somewhere around that time period. I was in junior high school, and that was all the rage. This new swimming pool that the county built, 3 diving boards, including a high dive, and an enormous pool, and then a kiddie pool, a snack bar that served all kinds of. I just imagine they had these slices, the little square slices of pizza. And Penn Supreme made this ice cream. I think it was called a salty dog or something. It was this long ice cream coated with chocolate and nuts on the outside. And they sold that at the pool, and of course snow cones and sodas. But that became our life when that pool was built. But I never forgot the Conestoga. We still do. As an adult, me and my 2 brothers bought a canoe, so I still continued to use the Conestoga River. As a matter of fact, we used to take trips from Lancaster the whole way down to the Susquehanna River in a canoe. That was an all-day job, and I mean a job. That was a lot of work.
So now, did you ever, you shared with us that you were a police officer for Lancaster. Did
Yes.
you ever have any issue with kids sneaking off to swim in more recent times down at the river and having to say to them, "Hey guys, get out," or anything like that?
Unfortunately, while I was a police officer, I know of at least one, more than one drowning. There's a very deep section that goes through the county park between the Strawberry Street Bridge and the Duke Street Bridge. There's a really deep section there over my head, and I'm 6 foot tall. Where a kid, I remember that one distinctly. There was a kid that drowned there. And there was also, I remember, a kid drowning up at the waterworks up off of Grovetown Road near the back of the RCA property where the railroad bridge goes over top. So there were a couple drownings that I had to attend from kids swimming in the Conestoga, and those were unfortunate occasions that I had to deal with.
Can you tell us about the Pogie?
The Pogie is the name that my mother and her siblings and other kids in the neighborhood called the Conestoga in the area behind the county hospital, behind Conestoga View. There was a section there where they swam, and I don't know, I assume that they swam there because there were a couple bridges there at that time. At one time, there was a bridge there at Hickory Tree Heights. That's off of Broad Street. It has a new name, Claremont Place or something now. There was a bridge there that took the trolley across the river to Rocky Springs. There were 2 bridges. I think there was a bridge for the trolley going in and a bridge for the trolley going out. As a matter of fact, they used the abutment for the new bridge that goes to the youth detention center. They used the same pillars for the new bridge that they put there. And I know it's before my time, but I knew the trolley crossed there. So, in back of that wooded area behind the newly named Hazel Jackson Middle School, there was a trolley bridge there, and there was a shanty town in there. So I knew kids played down there, but I know that's the area they called the Pogie. And there's actually a photograph of my mother, Olive Sims, Richard Sims, Herman Sims, Barb Gantz, Ann Gantz, Russell Howe, all swimming there in the Pogie. They're all standing there in the water, and somebody took a picture of them. So you will see that picture.
Now, were there any, did you guys do cookouts or family reunions ever down by the river?
Well, before there was a Lancaster County Central Park, which is surrounded by the river, it was Williamson Park and Kiwanis Park, and they joined them together and made Lancaster County Central Park. So that area where the pool is now was not there. And I would have to say that the black population just about always used the Williamson area. There's that pavilion is still there. It's a big wooden pavilion, and that's where a lot of families picnicked. As a matter of fact, about 8 years ago, we had a family reunion there. So it's not actually on the river, but the river's right there. Uh, as a kid, we would camp overnight in the Kiwanis section of the park. There was a man by the name of Earl Bumper Stewart who led the boxing program here. He was a boxer as a young man. He ran the Lancaster Boxing Club and was very active with Crispus Attucks. And he would take us boys overnight camping and arm us with sticks and bags to catch the notorious albatwitch. Yes, an animal that lived in wooded areas that nobody ever found. But it was a way to scare us. And we had a lot of fun.
I was going to say, did you guys spend the evening looking for it?
All night looking for one, and these adults would claim they have one and they were chasing one, and we go chasing after them. Today they would call it hazing, but that was fun in those days. Everybody wanted to be scared to bed. In the woods, you're sleeping out. You're not in your house. You're sleeping out in the woods. You wanted to be scared. Boys, not girls.
All right. Where did you learn to swim?
I think it's hard for me to say, but I think I really learned to swim at the Jewish Community Center down in the Peckway area.
Okay, the one at the Boys and Girls Club.
The Boys and Girls Club used to take us. I think that's where I always played around swimming, but the creek, the Conestoga River, was always a place where you could really stand up. You'd manage to get up, but there when you're swimming in a pool, if you dive off a diving board, you're always in the deep section. So I think that's where I learned. So I ended up becoming a lifeguard. The Boys Club, Lancaster Boys Club and Girls Club had a lifeguard program, and I became a lifeguard then. Later in life, but not at that time. But I was always a good swimmer. I still swim.
And would you happen to have any stories about Camp Snyder or Camp Hogan?
I have stories about both of them. Camp Snyder, as soon as I was old enough, all of us, me and my brothers and all of my neighbors, all the kids that I knew in the neighborhood, including my next door neighbors, the Plazas, we all went to Camp Snyder as young kids. And Camp Snyder I know they made it affordable for every family. I know there were families that kids had no money at all, but everybody went to summer camp. And there was one night a week that you slept overnight at camp. They took 2 buses a day from the Boys Club, originally on Pershing Avenue, to Camp Snyder. And it was run at that time by the state representative, state legislator, Sherman Hill. His wife was the cook, but many of our parents were involved in family night, bringing food to Camp Snyder. We slept in Army tents. That somehow they got surplus Army tents. And my fondest day at Camp Snyder is Capture the Counselors Day. And the counselors took off out of camp, and we took off after them in teams, in coordinated teams to catch the counselors. And whoever was able to capture, they got so many points. But I remember my counselors, Nelson Polite Jr., Stanley Brown, Jay Whitmer, Bob Brown, Donnie Erb ran the camp before Ted Darkus got there. Dave Stump. Those guys were our mentors as kids and taught us everything: riflery, archery, how to identify poison ivy, how to identify the different ferns that were at Camp Snyder, how to identify the insects and the turtles and the toads and everything about camping. A really good experience for every kid in the neighborhood. Boys clubs, Camp Snyder, which eventually turned into Camp Hogan when I was an adult. But while I was with the Lancaster Police Department, I did a nature hunt there probably for about 20 years. So I would bring Lancaster police officers down to both Camp Snyder first, and then when they switched over to Camp Hogan, we would have this nature hunt, a scavenger hunt, and we'd have a list of like 6 pages worth of and pictures of each thing that the kids had to get, and whoever came back with it first, everybody got a prize. But we had ice cream and cookies. It was always something to eat as the prize for the group that came back with the most items. We always gave a prize to the group that came back with the most items first, or who had all of the items. So I continued working with Camp Snyder well into my adulthood.
All right. All right. Nope, we're gonna keep going.
Okay, let me turn mine off.
So can you share with me your particular favorite part of the river to swim at, to play at? Were there different parts where, I don't know if you might have played manhunt by the river or anything like that, but some other things that you might have gotten into?
Well, the freedom of being down at the river. There weren't very many adults. There would always be somebody there fishing. As a matter of fact, there was a lady by the name of Abby McLean, and she used to catch carp and catfish there, and then she would sell them on the corner. And she was always down there fishing. There were other adults there fishing in the Conestoga all the time. We didn't have sophisticated vessels like kayaks or canoes, whatever we were down there with, something we made. So it was an adventurous time. It wasn't built up then. There was no county park, so that part wasn't level and clean. There was no, the grass is planted there now, and there's trees and there's parking lots. None of that was there then. It was a wild area, so it was a place for us to romp and roam. And again, we had our secret society that went and got bamboo over there. And that was the fun of it, but just the ability to get down there and get away from adults. Hot summer days, school's out. What are we going to do? We're going to go down to the creek and we're going to spearfish, and we're going to get in the water and swim around for a while. And none of us ever got in trouble except me.
Your parents weren't playing.
Myself and my next door neighbor, who was the same age as me, Norbert Plaza. Well, one day we went down to the creek, and I said I'm there always in fair weather. Nah, that's not true. I was there in bad weather too. So the creek, there were something called low-head dams at that time all over the Conestoga, which allowed the Conestoga to freeze, completely freeze over. Now it freezes in sections because they took all of those low-head dams down. But the Conestoga used to freeze, and we would go down there. We didn't have ice skates, but we'd just go down in our shoes, and we would pretend we were ice skating, and we'd back and forth, back and forth. And the ice was not as thick as it should have been, and I went through. Yes. I went through the first time down to about my chest. I got back up on my knees. My friend is frozen, looking at me. He doesn't say a word, and I don't say a word. And I got up to my knees on the ice, and I crawled a little bit, and I went down a second time. This time I went down that I saw that gap between the ice and the surface of the creek, so I could see that airspace. So the first time I wasn't really scared. I was scared, but it wasn't the second time when I saw that my head went under the water. This time I was scared. And then I boosted myself up a second time and got on my knees and crawled a little bit and got over to my friend, and we took off straight up Strawberry Street back home to his house, not to my house. And I stayed up there. I took all my clothes off, put them on the radiators and trying to get my clothes dry before I had to go home. My mom kept calling me, Jerry, what are you doing? I'm saying, well, we're reading comic books, Mom. I'm trying to get my clothes dry. I didn't tell my mom that story till I was 30 years old, that I actually went through the ice. Yeah, that's probably the most scaredest I was in my whole life. But yeah, I went through. Shouldn't have been on that creek. Shouldn't have been on that ice. Yeah.
Now, would you let your children swim?
In the creek, I think there's something about freshwater swimming. There's something about that water. I haven't been creek swimming for a while, but I always thought that everybody should have that experience. It's different, you know. I go to the ocean and all that, but there's something about freshwater swimming. I can't explain it. It's just different.
Oh, that's awesome. So
Yeah.
you would let your kids swim in the river?
I wouldn't let them go on the ice. I tell you that.
Is there anything that you think that the city could do to remedy any issues of the river, or anything that they should be addressing?
I am a person that still visits. First of all, I live on the Conestoga. I live in a place which was called, well, it got the name Oregon when Oregon became a state, but before that it was Catfish. So I live up off the Oregon Pike, but my backyard is the Conestoga River. I'm always still on that river. I guess water fascinates. I think it soothes and calms people, but I'm always there. So during the pandemic, I would get my lunch on Tuesdays and Thursdays from Saka, and I would go down to the county park and park my car and eat my lunch. And some of my friends would join me there from time to time. And about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I noticed the new signs posted in the county park on the Conestoga River that say, warning, the city of Lancaster's water treatment plant, I'm paraphrasing, cannot treat this water, their wastewater adequately, and from time to time that pollution is dumped into the Conestoga River. So I'm assuming they have to do this by some law or regulation, post those signs. Like I said, they're new. They've only been put there a couple weeks ago. And my first thoughts are, well, I know where the city sewage plant is. It's south of Lancaster. It's actually in Lancaster Township. And the river runs from north to south. So if the river runs from north to south, that pollution is put downriver and goes south of Lancaster towards the Susquehanna River. It doesn't go north. So why does the county park have to post those signs? Because now I'm sure it puts a little bit of fear in anybody who wants to get into the water. Secondly, Paul Weiss, who is the county parks director, I spoke to him 2 months ago about why there is no access to the river in the park. Why are there no docks? Why are there no entranceways into the river? Is it liability? And he just said, yeah, that's the reason why. The county does not promote swimming. They don't prohibit it. There's no signs say no swimming, and I see kids out there swimming, but the county does not promote getting into the water. And it doesn't have to be swimming, but there's a lot of kayakers now. There are a lot of people with canoes. You would think they would put some docks there so easy access in and out of the water. Why is there no dock where I can tie my kayak and some steps to get me up onto the bank? I can have my picnic lunch and then, go on about my journey. But they don't promote that. And that's kind of a disappointment. I wish they would promote boating, more boating opportunities on the Conestoga.